Hello everyone, Camel here with the Magicka Sorcerer PvE Dragonbones DLC DPS build. This is going to be quite the comprehensive guide. This is definitely, by far and away, the most popular class in Elder Scrolls Online. I'm going to show you two builds, one that is definitely tried and true and has been used in many dungeons, come up by my guildmates, Devil Dog and Gina Beam, and the other one I created myself, has not actually left this testing environment that I've made here. I cannot say for sure how it works in a trials environment, but this first build I'll show you absolutely does. So, I'm going to show you the champion points, skills, the gear, rotation, all that stuff in a minute. So let's get right into it. The first thing, this is probably the most important part of a Magicka Sorcerer, is Necropotence. You get 3k Magicka when you have a pet, and it gives you 3k Magicka plus from the set pieces. This is really important. As you can see, we have, on this bar, over 50k Magicka. Why is this important? Well, our pet pulse scales from max Magicka, so it's more important to have Magicka rather than spell damage, and we'll get a lot of damage out of this little guy thanks to Necropotence. Also, when you're running in a group, you can use the shield. The shield is huge. It's pretty much 30k with our 50k Magicka, so it's very strong, makes this very hard to kill. It's very important you run Necropotence. There are alternatives, but it is probably the most important set for this build. Everything else is rather optional. The other 5-piece we have is Mechanical Acuity. Now, this is my personal preference. I found this does a little bit more damage than with, say, Ilambris or Zaan. It's very slight. If you don't like Acuity and would prefer to run a monster set, that completely works as well. It is a personal preference thing. There are a lot of gear sets you can use, combinations of Julianos, Ilambris. If you don't have these two staves, Master and Maelstrom, they are kind of hard to get. You can run 2 random staves, 3 willpower, Necro Julianos, both 5 pieces, if you have the staves. That's a good beginner setup. If you don't have the staves, I would strongly encourage you trying to get them. They're very important. So we have 5 Necro, 5 Mechanical Acuity, the Master's Lightning Staff. We use this with Shot Clench. It's a strong dot, and it gets further upgraded. And the cost is reduced by this. So this is nice to have. It'll increase your DPS by a pretty good margin. This is even more powerful. The Maelstrom's Lightning Staff. When we cast our Wall of Elements, we gain light attack and heavy attack bonus damage. Very important. Run these 2 staves if you have them. As for skills, Blockade of Storms, as I just stated, we need this for the buff from the Maelstrom, but it's also an incredibly strong dot in its own right. Liquid Lightning. This is almost always our strongest ability. It does the most damage on a combat parse, which I will show at the end. Keep this up. Do not let this fall off if you can help it. LE Drain. Use this on a target dummy if you're alone. In a group, you'll never need this. Healers will provide it for you. Some 4-man dungeons, if the healer is really bad, they might not have it, but in any trial group, it'll be provided for you. Bandages. Very strong. Gives us more max Magicka. We really want this because, again, magic is what makes our pet so powerful. Volatile Familiar. This is a very strong little thing. It actually does a ton of damage. You want to keep this up a lot. Storm Atronach. I have found that this out-damages Destruction Ultimate. If you want more AoE, you could run Destro Ulti here. That's up to you. It's not really a huge deal. I just think this does a little bit more single target, and the synergy is very strong. When someone activates it, they get 25% more damage for 8 seconds. That's very powerful. Here, we have Shooting Star, Morph of Meteor from the Mages Guild. This is a pretty decently strong ulti, but what we use it for is just a little bit more max Magicka. Shock Clench, it's a dot. We use it. It's nice to keep sustain up. Very important to use. Haunting Curse. So, this is probably where it starts to get a little odd. Why use Haunting Curse over Daedric Prey? Well, you could easily use Daedric Prey here too, but I actually find that Haunting Curse does ever so slightly more damage, and let's say you're in a trial where you can't run pets, maybe Asylum, AA, etc. then you don't have to go change your morph. You already have this for a non-pet build, so you could run a Force Pulse build instead. This just makes it more flexible. It's nice damage. It also improves our sustain because unlike Daedric Prey, it doesn't have to be cast every time. It can be cast every 2 rotations. Very important. Again, personal preference. It fits my playstyle better, but if you like Daedric Prey, go for that. Inner Light, you actually can use this for Empower sometimes, but mostly it's for max Magicka and spell critical. 5% more, very strong. Again, we have Bounty Geese because it's a toggle, need it on both bars, and same with Familiar, on both bars, has to be there, or else it won't work. Champion points. The green tree, you want a decent amount in Tenacity and Arcanist. Summon Warlord, I haven't put all the points here because that's your preference. And the red, I also haven't put here because it's your preference, but these 3 and these 2 are your priorities. I won't give a specific number because it's important, it's up to you. Ironclad is probably the highest one you want to put because most damage is direct damage. As far as rotation, it's fairly simple. Unlike Magic and Nightblade or other classes of the dynamic rotation, this actually is a static rotation. So it's not too difficult. I'm going to show you it real quick, and then I'm going to show you a parse to show you how this works. To start the fight, drink a potion, spell power potion, light attack Clench, swap, light attack Liquid Lightning, light attack Blockade, Storms, light attack Pet, light attack Curse, heavy attack, repeat. Cast Taunt and Curse when it runs out. If you're using Prey, just cast it every time. As you can see, it's fairly simple. It's not too hard to master. What is important is making decisions in the execute phase of when you need your dots to stay up and when you should just start spamming Clench. It's important to figure out. I'm going to show you really quickly a combat parse with this build. Okay, so here's something very important to note. Notice our drain versus registration, or how much we use for resources. They're very close, which means this can be sustained very easily in a solo scenario. That's nice. We don't ever really run into Magicka. It doesn't even come close. Very important, solid overall build. As I said, tested in trials. As you can see, Liquid Lightning is our most powerful dot and damage ability in general. Light attack being right after that. Blockade, Zap, Pulse. All of these are AoE, hence why we run 2 Lightning Staffs and not 1 Lightning, 1 Inferno. Heavy attack was also some decent damage. Haunting Curse is up there too, as I said, it's a very strong ability. Shock Clench, Fire Weapon, Shock Pulse. I used Poisons for this particular parse, but it's very negligible. It's just running the Flame Enchant on the back bar. Shock Clench again with its secondary dot, Poison, Burning, all the rest. Now I'm going to show you the blue tree to show you why I have it set up this way. I wanted to show you the parts first so you can see where the damage comes from. Master at Arms, I have a decent amount here because Shock Clench is direct damage. It's nice to have. Also, again, if you're swapping builds around, if you need to go Force Pulse build in a trial, you want a decent amount here. It's important. Staff Expert, it's nice to have. You could probably redistribute this if you wanted to, but I think it's nice for heavy attacks, light attacks, which we do a lot. 36 into Elfborn. It could be a little higher, actually. I haven't tested it too much with Acuity, but I think it's better to have more into Elemental Expert. We have so much elemental damage. Spell Erosion, 33. You could reduce this if needed. I wouldn't increase it. It's about right. Thaumaturge, 75. Now, I've said that Exploiter isn't worth it anymore. And this is true. It still rings true. We have it just for convenience, but I would even put maybe a bit more points into Thaumaturge because, like I said, most of our damage comes from Liquid Lightning, Blockade, Pulse, Curse, right? All those are dots, so Thaumaturge is going to improve your DPS more than any other blue tree. Now, you might be asking, compared to some other setups, isn't this rather low? Now, I'll say to you, I am not Sorc. I do not play Sorc on live. This is on the PTS. I don't really play Sorc. I'm not the best Sorc. I got this build from my guildmates, Devil Dog and Gina Bean. They like it like this. And in a trial, it will do much more damage. With a better rotation than mine and more understanding of the Sorc as a class, you should get more damage than this. You must remember that you don't have Minor Berserk from Combat Prayer, which is why some classes like Nightblade are inflated a little bit, and Templar, getting its own minor spell damage, is also slightly inflated. At the same time, we have high minor vulnerability, which helps the rest of the group, so it's important to keep these. They also have way more AoE damage than the other Magicka classes. So even though Sorc might be slightly behind Nightblade in single target, it has a ton of AoE that is very strong that makes up for it. It also provides minor vulnerability, 75%. It's great for the group. We'd get more damage from the other classes by applying this. In terms of food and potions, you should run blue food. You can sustain very easily with blue food with this build. It's not an issue. For stones, I use the Lover when I'm solo in VMA, sometimes even in some 4-man dungeons if I don't really think we have enough pen. In a trial, you should use Apprentice. There's going to be enough penetration as there is. Potions, spell power pots. You can use these to get major sorcery, but you can also use Power Surge and replace Inner Light. Now, you lose a little bit of magic that way. It looks a lot lower than the Peta. You lose a little bit of magic that way, but we gain major sorcery, and we get a heal for every crit we get. Combine this with Mechanical Acuity, and you have some very strong passive healing. It's also a way to save money if you don't feel like spending on potions too much. That also works. This build is very solid. It's very hard to kill. Has a lot of AoE damage. It's simple to play. There's a lot of reasons you should use this build, and if I had to try one, I would say use this build over the other one. It's more consistent. It's easy to use. Use this build if you're just learning Sorc. The second build I'm going to show you is theory crafted, more or less. I've tested it in this test environment, but it's still theory crafted and untested in trials. So I cannot say for sure what its effectiveness is. Alright, so with this build, it's an interesting idea. We're going to make crystal fragments are spammable. Now, you can run Zaan or Ilambris, but I actually think it's better to run Zaan in melee, Ilambris at range. You don't lose much DPS either way. They're both very close. So, I dropped Mechanical Acuity because I don't think the crit synergizes too well with this build. You could probably still use it. It's probably fairly close. But I'm going to show you this build and what it does. So, in comparison to the other build, which is a static rotation, this is a dynamic rotation. What that means is you cannot just simply do a static rotation. I'm not just applying dots like I did. I don't have some order like the last build. This makes it more confusing. It's a little hard to keep track of, but it's still very doable. What we use: 2 monster set, 5 necro still, 3 willpower. Willpower I prefer to IA because it gives us more Magicka, and Magicka helps the pet more. You could run IA if you think your crit is too low, sometimes it is, and they're both solid options, but 3-piece willpower in my opinion is a little better. Asylum's Perfected Inferno Staff. The reason we have an Inferno Staff here is because with crystal fragments, we're doing more direct damage. Okay? So it's kind of important to get this Ancient Knowledge passive. Very strong. We also get to use Force Pulse as a spammable rather than Shock Clench. I find this does a little more damage with this build. It's a little more fast-paced. It's very nice. Everything else is pretty much the same. We have Maelstrom Lightning again. You can run poisons here. It's not a huge difference, really. A Flame Enchant also works, or even a Weapon Damage Enchant. That's up to you. Willpower, all that. Now, as far as rotation, what I like about this build is you get Crystal Frags on both bars. That means any spells we cast have a chance to proc Crystal Frags, like that. Crystal Frags, Frag. I had the bars messed up, so I was used to something else being there. But the point is, you can get a ton of Crystal Frag packs. Now, one of the issues with this build is that it's RNG based to a degree. You have to rely on Crystal Frag procs to get a lot of damage. But I consistently pull 37 to 39-ish K damage with this. The sustain's a bit worse. It's a little harder to sustain. And you have to decide when to heavy attack and when to let a dot fall off slightly. Basically, the rotation is this. Your dots, Crystal Frag when it pops. Haunting Curse, recast it every 2 times. Use Force Pulse when doing nothing. Heavy attack. Keep going. Every time a Crystal Frag procs, you want to use it immediately. Stop everything you're doing. If you know you're going to have to swap and heavy attack, you might want to stop putting a dot down. I let my dots fall off there. That's a big DPS loss. The point is, dots are a priority. Crystal Frag is more of a priority. Everything up. And run for yourself. Dynamic creations will always do more damage than static in this game. They're just more difficult, and you have to figure it out on your own. I'm showing you the build in the video and some ideas. The priorities are your dots, Crystal Frag, then Haunting Curse, and then Pet. Force Pulse is your lowest priority. Use it only when you have to, or just can. So Force Pulse should only be used occasionally. In Execute, you want to spam Force Pulse on the last 200k or so, just to finish it off faster. I'm going to show you a parse with this build to show you what happens and where everything comes from. This is the Crystal Frag build. As you can see, Crystal Frag is our second strongest ability right after Liquid Lightning. That's why the champion points is the same as the last build because, again, Liquid Lightning and Blockade are still very strong. You don't want to reduce Thaumaturge too much. Crystal Fragments, incredibly strong. We had very low crit chance here. If this was higher, this could have been over 39k easily, even if we had just 50% crit. Our crit in general was pretty low. We only had 36. That's very unlikely. If we had a higher crit chance, this could have been almost 40k easily. In a trial scenario, even though your drain is a lot worse than your registration, you can sustain a lot better because of healers, spamming bubbles, and all this other stuff. I'm actually fairly certain this could be an almost full light attack build in trials. It's up to you. You can still run blue food. I actually did a couple parses today with blue food, and it worked fine. But Witch Mothers is a safer bet if you want to sustain more light attacks. This just requires a couple more heavy attacks. This is more light attacks. Ultimately, both builds are very strong. If you want to try out my build, go for it. I'd say if you are new to this class, you should go with Gina and Devil's build. It is probably more consistent, it sustains better, and it's been proven to work in a trial, whereas mine has never left this house. I hope this helped you guys. If there's anything else you need, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions, and go out there and have some fun with Magicka Sorcs. Peace.